In the darkness of a dying continent, embers rose like prayers no one would answer. Previously, empires clashed, thrones trembled, and a window in Prague changed everything. Part 2. Europe in Flames, where faith became fire, and fire consumed millions. From Prague, the shockwave spread, and no corner of Germany would be spared. Chapter 1. The Bohemian Disaster, where one crown destroyed a kingdom. The Bohemians crowned a new king. Rejecting the Habsburgs was a gamble few would survive. They called him the Winter King, because his reign would barely survive the season. In Vienna, Emperor Ferdinand received the news, and his fury was terrifyingly calm. Letters flew across Europe. Ferdinand was not asking for help, he was demanding it. Spain answered the call. Blood was thicker than borders, and the Habsburgs stood united. Maximilian of Bavaria raised the Catholic banner, and an army marched behind faith. But where were Frederick's allies? The Protestant chairs sat empty, and silence sealed his fate. England's King James refused to help his own son-in-law. Politics defeated family. November 1620, two armies converged on a hill outside Prague called White Mountain. The battle was massive, brutal, and shockingly, it lasted less than 2 hours. The Protestant army didn't retreat. It disintegrated like sand against a wave. Frederick fled Prague in the night. A king for one winter, a fugitive forever. Catholic forces entered Prague triumphant. The rebellion was crushed beneath iron boots. Then came the repression. Arrests, confiscations, and executions rained upon Bohemia. 27 Protestant leaders were executed in Prague's square, their heads displayed as warnings. Churches were seized, clergy expelled. Bohemia's Protestant soul was being ripped away. But war doesn't stop at borders. Spanish troops invaded Frederick's own homeland next. The Bohemian phase ended. Catholics had won completely, or so they believed. Chapter 2. Danish Intervention. A Protestant king rides south to save the cause. Christian IV of Denmark saw himself as the Protestant champion Europe desperately needed. Danish armies marched into Germany. Finally, Protestants had a royal sword behind them, but then emerged a shadow. Albrecht von Wallenstein, a genius who sold war itself. Wallenstein's army paid for itself through plunder. War was his business, and business was booming. His mercenary army spoke every language in Europe, united not by faith, but by gold. At Dessau Bridge, Wallenstein crushed the Protestant forces. The river ran red with defeat. At Lutter, the Danish king himself was wounded. His grand intervention was collapsing. Once again, the Protestant cause crumbled. 2 interventions, 2 devastating failures. Wallenstein marched all the way to the Baltic Sea. Denmark itself was now in danger. Then Ferdinand overplayed his hand. The Edict of Restitution demanded everything back since 1552. Hundreds of properties, monasteries, entire territories. Protestants faced total dispossession. But even Catholic princes grew nervous. Ferdinand's power was becoming everyone's problem. Under pressure, Ferdinand dismissed Wallenstein. But you don't discard a weapon that remembers. The Peace of Lubeck ended Denmark's war. Christian IV retreated, humiliated and broken. Chapter 3. The Swedish Meteor. A warrior king who changed everything. Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden, brilliant, devout, and about to rewrite the art of war. His innovations were revolutionary. Mobile cannons, combined tactics, soldiers who believed in their cause. July 1630, Swedish boots hit German soil, and the war would never be the same. But who funded this Protestant crusade? A Catholic cardinal. France's Richelieu played every side. Richelieu didn't care about religion. He cared about destroying Habsburg power by any means. May 1631. Magdeburg was sacked in the war's worst atrocity, 20,000 dead in hours. When the flames died, Magdeburg was ash, a city erased, a horror that echoed across Europe. After Magdeburg, Protestant princes finally understood neutrality would not save them from slaughter. Breitenfeld, September 1631. Gustavus won the first great Protestant victory, and everything shifted. The Swedish army swept through Germany, liberators to some, another army of occupation to others. Gustavus pushed into Bavaria, approached Austria. Vienna itself trembled at his advance. Desperate, Ferdinand recalled Wallenstein, the only man who could stop the Swedish storm. Wallenstein rebuilt an imperial army from nothing. His dark genius had not faded. November 1632, Lutzen, the two greatest generals of the age, finally faced each other. In the fog of battle, Gustavus Adolphus was killed. The Protestant champion fell from his horse forever. Incredibly, the Swedish army still won, but victory without their king tasted like ashes. His body returned to Sweden. Across Protestant Europe, a continent mourned its fallen lion. The war didn't stop. It had grown beyond any single man, feeding on its own momentum. Wallenstein began negotiating with everyone, enemies, allies, anyone who might serve his ambition. Ferdinand signed the order. Wallenstein, the indispensable general, was now marked for death. They murdered him in his bedroom. Swords and halberds ended the most dangerous man in Europe. At Nördlingen, 1634, Spanish and imperial forces crushed the Swedes. The tide turned again. The map shifted once more. Neither side could win, and Germany bled between them. The Peace of Prague, 1635, exhausted princes tried to end it, but the war had other plans. Chapter 4. France enters the war, and the flames reach heights no one imagined. Richelieu dropped the mask. Catholic France openly declared war on Catholic Austria and Spain. French armies invaded from the west. New fronts opened, and Germany's suffering multiplied. A Catholic cardinal funding Protestants, Catholic nations fighting each other, this war had lost its soul. German villages burned for the third, fourth, fifth time. The countryside became a wasteland. Armies consumed everything in their path. Behind them, only silence and starvation remained. Plague followed the armies like a shadow. Disease killed far more than any battle ever could. 1/3 of Germany's population vanished. In some regions, more than half simply disappeared. In the worst areas, civilization itself collapsed. Starvation drove people beyond the limits of humanity. Richelieu died in December 1642. The architect of France's strategy never saw his war end. Louis XIII followed months later, leaving a 5-year-old boy as King of France. At Rocroi, 1643, young Condé shattered the legendary Spanish tercios. An era ended on that field. For 120 years, the tercios were invincible. At Rocroi, that myth died forever. Chapter 5. The English Revolution, where a king lost more than his crown. Charles III believed God chose him to rule. Parliament had a very different opinion. Puritans feared Catholic influence through Charles's French wife. Suspicion poisoned English politics. Ship money, taxes without consent. Charles didn't just bend the law, he ignored it completely. Scotland exploded first. The Scots rejected Charles's prayer book and prepared for war. Desperate for money, Charles summoned Parliament. They came with demands, not donations. Parliament destroyed the king's closest allies. Strafford and Laud fell, and Charles stood alone. Ireland erupted in Catholic rebellion. Massacres sent shockwaves through an already terrified England. Charles personally stormed Parliament to arrest 5 members, but the birds had already flown. The king left London to raise an army. He would never return as a free man. August 1642, the royal standard rose at Nottingham, and England went to war with itself. Cavaliers against Roundheads. Aristocratic cavalry versus disciplined infantry. A nation torn in two. Early battles solved nothing. England bled, but neither side could land the killing blow. Then Oliver Cromwell rose, an unknown farmer who became the most feared general in England. His new model army was revolutionary, professional, disciplined, promoted by merit, not by birth. Naseby, June 1645. Cromwell's army destroyed the Royalists, and the war was decided. Charles surrendered to the Scots, not Parliament, still scheming, still believing he could win. The Scots sold their king to Parliament for back pay, a monarch reduced to a transaction. Even as prisoner, Charles negotiated with everyone, promising everything, meaning nothing. His scheming triggered a second civil war. More blood spilled for a king who couldn't stop lying. Cromwell's army had enough. They demanded the king face trial as a man of blood. Pride's purge removed moderate MPs by force. Only those willing to try the king remained. Charles stood before the court with contempt. No earthly power, he said, could judge God's anointed. The verdict was guilty. Tyrant, traitor, murderer, and public enemy of the English people. January 30th, 1649, Charles wore 2 shirts so the cold wouldn't make him shiver before the crowd. He knelt, gave the signal, and the axe fell on the neck of an anointed king. The crowd gasped. Some wept, some cheered, some dipped handkerchiefs in royal blood as souvenirs. Every monarch in Europe felt that blade. If England could kill its king, no throne was safe. England was declared a republic. The Commonwealth, a world without kings, had begun. Chapter 6. The Peace of Exhaustion. Because nobody won, everybody just stopped dying. Diplomats gathered at Westphalia, 2 cities, hundreds of representatives, and decades of grievances. While diplomats talked, soldiers kept fighting. Every battle was leverage for the negotiating table. Zusmarshausen, 1648, the last major battle, fought by soldiers too exhausted to feel victory. October 1648, the Peace of Westphalia was signed, and 30 years of hell finally ended. The treaty redrew Europe, borders changed, religions settled, and the old order was buried. Switzerland and the Netherlands were officially free. Centuries of Habsburg claims dissolved with ink. Religious tolerance expanded, not out of enlightenment, but because everyone was too tired to fight. The Holy Roman Empire shattered into over 300 tiny sovereignties, an empire in name only. France emerged triumphant. Richelieu's vision fulfilled. The Habsburgs weakened on every side. Germany lay in ruins, burned villages, empty fields, and survivors who had forgotten how to live. Chapter 7. The wider world, because Europe wasn't the only stage burning. In Beijing, the last Ming emperor hanged himself as rebels stormed his palace. A dynasty ended in a noose. The Manchus poured through the Great Wall, invited by a desperate Ming general who doomed China. The Qing dynasty began its conquest, a foreign people claiming the mandate of heaven by force. Japan slammed its doors shut. The Tokugawa declared Sakoku, and the world was locked outside. At Shimabara, Christian peasants made their last stand. 37,000 died for forbidden faith. Shah Jahan began building the Taj Mahal. Grief transformed into the most beautiful building on earth. The Dutch East India Company expanded relentlessly, controlling spice, controlling Asia, controlling wealth. English Puritans built new lives in Massachusetts, fleeing one revolution, unknowingly planting another. The Atlantic slave trade expanded horrifically. Millions of lives reduced to cargo in floating prisons. Chapter 8. The World in 1650. A planet transformed beyond recognition. Europe was unrecognizable, France dominant, Germany devastated, England without a king. The wars of religion were finally exhausting themselves. Tolerance came not from wisdom, but from weariness. Even amid the carnage, science pushed forward. Galileo's trial couldn't stop the earth from moving. Asia was in transformation. The Ming had fallen, the Qing were rising, and the Mughals glittered at their peak. European ships reached every ocean. Colonization was no longer an ambition. It was an unstoppable reality. From Westphalia emerged a new idea, the balance of power, where no single nation could dominate all others. A young boy watched from the French court, learning everything. His name was Louis, and he would become the sun. In England, Cromwell tightened his grip. The Republic would soon have a ruler more powerful than any king. 25 years of fire, revolution, and transformation. From 1625 to 1650, the world broke and rebuilt itself. Part 2, Europe in Flames, complete. The fire burned everything, and from the ashes, a new world emerged.